Hello. The question we'll be considering is, should the law allow doctors to administer lethal injections to patients who request them in order to put an end to their suffering? We'll be examining one of the most important debates in bioethics, the euthanasia debate. The debate involves a host of complex ethical, legal and social questions. My aim is to give you a basic introduction to the debate, an overview of some of the main arguments for and against legalizing euthanasia. The word euthanasia comes from the Greek for an easy death. There is no universally agreed definition, but one standard dictionary definition is the killing of someone who is very ill to end the person's suffering. I'll use the word in a broadly similar way and bring out a number of important distinctions. My definition of euthanasia is the intentional termination of a patient's life by a doctor because the doctor believes that death will benefit the patient. Note three aspects of this definition. First, it's concerned with the intentional termination of the patient's life, intention bearing its ordinary meaning of aim or purpose. On this definition, therefore, euthanasia does not include the administration of drugs like morphine if the doctor's intent is solely to ease pain, even if the doctor foresees that as a side effect of such palliative treatment, the drugs will also hasten death. Second, the definition is concerned with doctors, not lay people. The current debate is about whether doctors should be allowed to administer lethal injections to end patients' lives. Third, central to euthanasia is the idea that ending the patient's life will benefit the patient, typically by ending the patient's suffering. We now need to distinguish between cases where the patient has asked for euthanasia and cases where the patient hasn't. When the patient's life is ended at his or her request, I'll refer to this as voluntary euthanasia. When the patient's life is ended but the patient was incapable of asking for it, because, say, the patient was a baby or seriously demented, I'll call this non-voluntary euthanasia. And when a patient's life is ended against his or her wishes, I'll call this involuntary euthanasia. We might also include in this category patients who are capable of asking, but were given a lethal injection without being asked. Where a doctor intentionally ends a patient's life by an act, such as a lethal injection, I'll call this active euthanasia. And when a doctor intentionally ends life by an omission, such as withholding or withdrawing treatment, passive euthanasia. Note, however, that passive euthanasia occurs only when the doctor's intention in withholding or withdrawing treatment is to end the patient's life, not simply to withhold or withdraw treatment because it's futile or too burdensome to the patient. In any event, our focus in this learning sequence is not passive euthanasia, but active euthanasia, and in particular, voluntary active euthanasia, lethal injections at the patient's request. What is physician-assisted suicide? This is when a doctor intentionally helps a patient to commit suicide, that is, to end his or her own life. And a typical example would be when a doctor provides a patient with a prescription for a lethal dose of drugs, which the patient later takes.